My earliest memories, it's interesting because I found out when I was about 5 or 6 that my uncle was stage manager at a place called Collins Music Hall. And Collins Music Hall was a throwback from the Victorian musical eras, and it was a very interesting place. It was just a big variety show. He used to take me there, and I used to stand in the wings and watch various artists perform. Nothing that really sort of interested me except the actual workings of the stage management and then the band, and that was all great. Anyway, fast forward to getting a bit older, about 8 or 9, and my dad played piano, and he played piano in the army quite a lot. He became very popular because obviously he was, the go-to guy for, sing songs and whatever. Not a reader as such, but just all by ear, which was actually suited me fine at the time. And I was listening to records. They bought me a little Dansette record player that used half a valve. It was lovely. It was very sweet. I am indebted to them to actually starting me on my musical career. So I must have been insufferable when they bought me an acoustic guitar, because I must have been asking for. And I was very keen on. It was a local music shop, and I used to stand outside just looking at the guitars and things, And they bought me an acoustic, and I started, learning all sorts of stuff. There was stuff of the day. Well, really, we were in the late sort of Lonnie Donegan skiffle period. It was that onwards, and then it came, the Shadows, and I used to learn bits of that, and I got an electric guitar when I was Hofner, which is not great, but to me it was the best thing ever, and that was the only things around then, because you couldn't get American stuff, because that was the embargo with the States, and nothing ever came over. So I got that. I did my first performance, which not many people know, but I was actually on Carol Levis Jr. Discoveries, and I sung a song by Paul Anka. I don't know, I Love You Baby, I think. Something like that, I can't remember what it was. And I think I came second. That was like, that was a big deal. And then just started doing a few, like pub gigs really, not singing. I mean, because I never thought myself as a singer, quite rightly so. My ego was right about that. I did, gigs with the band. I started a band at school, which was great. It got me out of lots of stuff and to rehearse and whatever. And the singer we had was the woodwork teacher. It was his son, and the guy's name was Mr. Bean. And so the band was called George Bean and the Runners, and we did little gigs and stuff, all sorts of pop stuff. And unfortunately, George he died about 19. It's about 19. It's a real shame. I think it was leukemia, But anyway, I mean, it's a good. Just saying. I mean, I've jumped a bit of time there, but we did go on after school. So I left school, which I couldn't wait to do, unfortunately. But went out and we just did a few gigs. And then I went and did a day job, and that was at, my goodness me, I can't remember the name. Dallas Musical Instruments. And all I was doing was shifting boxes from one to the other. But I thought it was a musical job, but they're just amplifier boxes, which was very boring. So I used to take the guitar, sit in the loo up, furthest upstairs in the warehouse with a copy of the Melody Maker, just practice and read the Melody Maker. So I was totally unemployable then. And so one day I didn't get fired. Anyway, one day I was reading the Melody Maker and I saw an article. Now, you know, as I've said to people when I've told this, that, you know, you actually, you know, you're in a world without the internet, without mobile phones, and even answer phones were sort of in the early days. I mean, they were massive. And this article came up because people still put their phone number in to contact. So there was no barriers, you know, it was like, and he was saying that Vic Flick, the late Vic Flick, may he rest in peace, was leaving to go to America, and they were looking for a guitar player. And if you know, think you were sort of man enough for the job, or, you know, up to the job, please give me a ring. This was Bob Downs, the tenor player. And so I rang it, you know, I nipped into the manager's office when they were all out, you know, got the big black, you know, plastic phone. Hello, you know, do you know all the numbers? I said, yeah. You know, can you read music? Yeah. And of course, it's all eyes. And it was all happened very quickly, you know, in that day. And I went back to my folks. I said, please buy me that album of John Barry's greatest hits. And I just sat down and worked my way through it, woodshedding my way through it for a week until the audition. It was going to be in the cinema, but they'd forgotten to open it. So we were in the foyer of the cinema with people walking past, and it was like in Archway in Islington. And a guy had to crawl over to the box office to plug me in, and I set up my little amp and guitar by bus, coming by bus, by the way. And the first thing they do, they get a music stand out, and there's all this music, you know, I'm scared, you know. And they put the James Bond theme on the first up. And of course, and yeah, I can read the James Bond theme. All the notes could be dancing anywhere, you know, it didn't matter. Dun, 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 dun. And he said, it's a bit theatrical, Bob. Great guy, still in touch, you know, he's a fantastic guy. He said, stop. And he turned to the other 6, 5, whoever's there, said, this guy's good. So remember that. And he took the next one, it was Jukebox Jury, which was a big hit for John then with, you know, and of course I had the sound, you know, and that's obviously part of it. Then, you know, people were developing sounds of that was a very early sound like James Bond. It actually was different. It wasn't a dance band guitar sound, you know, like a lot of people had. They weren't translating to more modern sound, which is, you know, you can understand it, but that's what they heard, I'm sure, before the notes was just the actual sound, you know. It was so anyway, I got the job, and they gave me a lift home to and my mama answered the door, and I said hi, and they said, he's great, can he come on tour on Monday? And she went, well yes dear. You know, it was like they were freaking out, right? But all the band were at least 10 years older than me, so they were great. They looked after me, and I grew up in about 3 months, being on the road, trying to realise that you have to do washing and all that stuff I never knew anything about because I was sport, and yeah, so that's how it started. So off I went with the John Barry 7, and the guys were great to me because they were all a bit older and they'd all done gigs. The pianist used to be with a band called the New Seekers, which was a kind of folky band. Actually ended up marrying Judith Durham, who was actually the singer in the Seekers. That was a kind of very, very variety type act. You'd see them a lot on telly, and you know, so it was quite a mingle of things then. You know, when you used to do gigs, and it's carried on for quite a while. That it wasn't quite prepared for, like, say, a rock concert, or you know, you'd have a comedian that would come on and still warm the audience up like you did on telly. That you never saw that part. They would come up and they'd do the kind of same thing, and then there would be someone on, that was a little bit different from the band. It was all a bit. They didn't really get the idea. They were trying to change. The bands were a lot more ahead. Anyway, we did a lot of gigs like that, and we played. We always seemed to be top of the bill because John's name was, really big with what he was doing, and we did gigs like Gene Vincent. If anybody wants to Google Gene Vincent and go back to that, and Marty Wilde, that was all the early rockers, and they were there on too. So it was quite interesting. It was an education for me. It was fantastic. Anyway, I mean the John Barry 7 lasted about 3 years, and then John got a bit fed up with trying to organise it all, and he was writing a lot. He was writing other films. I mean, you probably remember the Ipcris file, and all that stuff was John. And basically, he was a composer more going out on the road, so it kind of dissipated. But I mean, my relationship with John was great. I think I did 8 or 9. I can't remember now. 8 films. James Bond films, and one of the highlights was actually doing the theme tune or the end titles, and I did the Enticed with Carly Simon and Sheena Easton and Rita Coolidge, and that was a fantastic. Because I used to come along and sing it, and then as a guide vocal, and then sing the main vocal. But that was lovely. So I left John. And the band more or less stopped. We actually did a single called. We had a little band. It's only lasted 6 months, but we had a record deal with Joe Meek, the late Joe Meek, and that's a name worth googling, because Joe was one of the forerunners in recording technology, and he had a great sound even. Now people go, because you can buy a Joe Meek compressor, which is basically, on, off, but really great sound. He used to have the machines in his kitchen, the tape machines in his kitchen, and like Tornadoes, Joe Meek produced. And there used to be a guy called Hines. It was all Googleable, all really interesting. And the top floor, which was also his bedroom, was the rhythm section, and the middle floor was the vocals and the guitars and stuff. Anyway, we did a remake called Bluebirds Over the Mountain, Shade Joey and the Night Owls, and it was got the front page of the Melody Maker, but really didn't do that much. So that was that. And at the time, I was being asked to do a few other things, and I got to know people in the business, and I did. A gig with Cat Stevens. I was asked to do, the gig with Mr. Stevens, with Yusuf now. And that was great. We went all over, and we did a tour that took us all over, especially to Sweden, and where this is another thing, where the bill was like, it was crazy bill. We were on, actually we were top of the bill, because Cat had the single "I Love My Dog," which is his first big hit. So he was up there, and there was the Walker Brothers, Engelbert Humperdinck, if you remember that, and of course Jimi Hendrix, who finished the first half, and we used to stand in the wings going, "This is something, this is great." Anyway, just a little caveat from that tour when we were in the outreaches of Sweden somewhere, and I was on the ground floor in my hotel, in the hotel where we stayed, and I heard this knocking on the window, and it was Jimmy, and still sort of dressed in his Sergeant Pepper type clothes, and he'd been locked out. So luckily we were on the ground floor. I let him in. Hello, Jimmy. Great. It was fantastic. I couldn't believe it was like I was still dreaming. And he came in, we had a cup of tea, we talked about everything else but music, really, you know, and it was great. It was great, a great social one. And then he left and then went to get the key, because it wasn't 24 hours, so they left the keys, you know, so I say, no one there looking after the front. So he went and nicked the key to get back into his room. But I thought, what a great you know, thing to happen. So that was that. I left USF around the corner to where he lived, a cafe his parents owned, and he was there, was the Empire Theatre opposite the Oasis swimming bath, and it used to be up. The reason I'm telling you this is because there's a new show going on called Hair, and I got a call from Gordon McDermott, the composer, asking me if I'd like to go and play. So that was the first rock and roll musical ever, and it was slightly outrageous. You know, it was out of control from the beginning. The end of the first half, the cast all had to come on naked, except for Jesus, who was in front and covering the naughty bits, had a Fender guitar, and he used to sort of do this, but make sure that anyway. So some little bit of technical information here. If you take the backplate off the Fender, which you usually do, just to adjust things, because there's 3 springs in the guitar, and I noticed one night he kind of went like this and pulled this very non-Jesus face, you know, very unserene face, and I thought, what's happened? And I kind of realised that he caught his pubic hairs in the springs of the. Everybody cracked up. It was bad. I got told off, you know, for laughing on stage, but it was funny, and that was a great time. I got to know quite a few people then, and I was doing sessions, starting to do a few sessions, which was great. One day I was at Lansdowne, which was sort of quite a famous studio then, and I was there. There's 3 guitar players, you know, for some reason, and it was quite a lot of musicians, and we were sat down, you know, in the reprobate guitar section, and 3 guitar players. So there's me, there's Jimmy Page, John McLaughlin, which is quite amazing. And we were talking to Blake, and Jimmy said, "I'm not going to do any more sessions. I'm going to form this rock band." So we know where that went, didn't we? And then John McLaughlin said, "Yeah," he said, "Actually, I'm going to go to America and you know, and try it for Miles Davis." And I thought, well, what am I doing? I'm doing sessions. He said, "Well, no," he said, John said, I was working with Georgie Fame, so I told Georgie about you. Do you want to go and do it? You know, go and audition for Georgie. And of course I did, and that was great for me, because it was like R&B and jazz together, and it kind of was good for me, because I was playing both styles. I've always been, you know, like I can play, you know, what we call jazz, if you like, but you know, always like the kind of R&B and rock sound, and that was in Georgie too. So we had a great time. I played with, you know, Paul Butterfield Blues Band. The Drifters are on, you know, yeah, that was, you know, like all those guys from it was just American people with, and Georgie. So it was great playing with those guys, and so that really set me up took my musical ability to a level where another level where I wanted it to be. Yeah, well, that was really about the 60s and very early 70s, and then, you know, we got sort of a lot more well known, was doing a lot more sessions, and I met Simon Phillips on the session at a place called Essex Music, which was in Poland Street. I say was because, you know, most of his studios, there was about nearly 300 studios working in London full time. There's about 3 or 4 now. So it's quite interesting, and that was all part of the social scene, which is now kind of dissipated more because, people aren't together playing, as a band. Lots of things have happened that, that a change is not for the best, but then a lot of things have happened as well. Good things. It's just change, just what happens. Anyway, I met Simon, and so by coincidence, a lady now passed called Anne Odell gave me a call and said, I think it was Herbie Flowers, said he might be interested in doing this band thing. I said, well, sounds good. She said, who do you think about drums? And I said, well, funny enough, I said, I was working with a guy this morning, Simon Phillips. I said, he's just incredible. He was 18 then, by the way. And he was so young. And playing, and she said, oh, I'd really like him to do it. I know about him, yeah. That was great. And then Chelsea came, Chelsea was living with Simon in the flat, funny enough, in Chelsea. And he came, they liked him, so he came along. So the band was called Chopin. Never sure why it was called Chopin, but that was Anne's thing. And we made a couple of really good albums with a producer called John Punter. And this band, or a lot of this band, played on an album of mine called Ready or Not, which is on DJM, which was Kaplan K, a guy who used to work at DJM, and he was the kind of A&R man. And that was a great album too. Anyway, we did gigs with ELO, part of ELO, and which was great. We were managed by a guy called Donovan, and he's gone now. But that was quite a tale. We all ended up in court on a sort of big non-paying for the album thing, which we won. But he was a bit of like the English version of the Rat Pack, really. Anyway, that was great. Just to say that if you look at any pictures of me with the ELO and Chopin, me and the cello player in the ELO called Hugh, have both went to buy, because we were both stupid and probably stoned and whatever we were, to a place in Camden Town called Go Hill, a bootmaker, and bought these thigh-length purple boots, which we thought were really cool. That's like glam rock over the top. And we didn't tell anybody. And then one night of the tour, they came through. I mean, the guy at Go Hill is probably not around anymore, but he used to just draw around your feet and do it all like that, Anyway, he got these boots and it came up to here. Like fishing boots, but really nice purple leather. So, very cool. And we thought, and we appeared on the stage and we just went on these boots. But the funniest thing was, of course, we realised that putting them on, you couldn't put any trousers over them. So what we had to do was, we had to cut them there and stick them inside the boots, so it didn't look weird. Well, that must have looked weird. And we came on like that, and everybody collapsed. No one could play for about 5. It was, so embarrassing. Anyway, I haven't told that story before. I just remember it was so funny though. It was brilliant. There was a lot of things going on. I mean, it was very busy session where I got really into the session scene, and there was Mo Foster and Simon, me, and a guy called Mike Moran, and that was really like the basic rhythm section that used to do most of the sessions. I mean, we were out, from dawn till dusk. Sometimes we'd sleep on the couch in the studio because we didn't have time to go back home. And I was only in Battersea, but it was crazy, because you used to do jingles in the morning, you know, at 8 o'clock, and then carry on to a 10 o'clock session. We were doing lots of sessions, you know, dawn till dusk. We couldn't do anymore. I mean, people would, you know, we'd fit things in. We actually had a roadie called Alf, and we had like 2 sets of gear. So he'd leave one at one studio, we'd go and play, and then he'd go and get that put out in another studio. Sort of logistic, bit of a nightmare. Anyway, was asked to do the original soundtrack album of Evita of Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. Tim's a lovely guy. And that really went over by a month in the studio. We were at Olympic Studios, great studio, you know. Rolling Stones had just been in, you know, it was a real cred studio. And we were in there like 2 months recording the original soundtrack to Evita, which was great, and went on to make some singles with Judie Covington, which led to Rock Follies with Andy Mackay, and that was lots of fun. That was a 2 series on Thames TV of this band, you know, the girls, the little ladies known as, trying to make it to stars. And in the end, I had a few speaking lines, and I was pulled over by a guy from Equity and said, "You better join Equity because you're actually doing talking." Oh, okay. So I joined Equity. But that was fantastic. I mean, that was very funny. And we did 2 albums, and they became, you know, they both went gold. You know, and anyway, Only Women Bleed, which was Julie Covington's big single, that went gold as well. So that was all good. And you know, it's a kind of, I don't know if you call it superstition, whatever, but the more hit records you're on, of course, the more in demand you are, because they see you obviously as part of, you know, what happened, which is really what session guys would do. So the Rock Follies was the main cast was the Little Ladies, and that was Julie Covington, Charlotte Cornwell, and Rula Lenska. And we used to go on really well. Rula's, you know, a lovely lady, and I was actually, where we're doing this interview now, doing an evening with, which is basically me talking about, you know, the history and a few instances and, you know, a few funny stories. And she was in the audience, and she came up to see me, and it was a wonderful surprise. It was really fantastic. She looked great. I mean, you know, she always did. But it was lovely to see her. Fantastic. Those days were, I think I have a feeling that younger people maybe feel they missed out on something with those days, and I'm not, don't accuse me of fogeyism or whatever, but actually what they missed out on was the social scene. The incredible, you know, how it always led to something else as well. You know, work-wise, it was amazing, because someone said, "Oh, do you want to, you know, you were always there." You know, so that was good, yeah. Ruler. So, I also, for some reason, reminds me of, you know, with you know, working with Andy Mackay, and we did a couple of albums for Andy, and I did the sort of, you know, string and brass parts, and it was they're like more straight albums, like classical albums, which were quite nice. So you know, we still are in touch, which is kind of lovely. In fact, I bought Brian Ferry's old settee from Rock Follies. He was moving. He said, "Do you want to buy a settee?" I thought, yeah. Marvin Gaye. During the sort of the heyday of the sessions, you know, the 80s, and you know, a lot of Americans would come and record in the UK, and a lot of composers would come to, like Abbey Road, and you'd see LSO, or, you know, one of the big orchestras. You know, I mean, Star Wars. You know, I mean, you know, a lot of those big films would be there. Anyway, I got a call from a lady called Isabel Griffiths. Now we know them as fixers, called a fixers, which is a slang for music contractor. And the music contractor phones you up, and that's another thing that somebody would say to them, hey, you know, this guy plays really good guitar or great drums or whatever, and they would say, okay, and they try you out, and if it all went well, which it would do, you know, you get booked on the session. So the four of us were the kind of team that did a lot of the sessions. And when somebody from America came over, this is Marvin, Gaye came over, she would book us to do it. Anyway, we were in Air Studios, which is like 214 Oxford Street on the corner. Great studio, everyone recorded there. It was a really famous studio. So really the best studio probably around. The guys, you know, that did most of the sessions, everything was set to, you know. Marvin came in with his four minders, and who were all taller than him. It was like this, you know. I walked in to the control room, no hellos or anything. And then I got I think it was Steve Churchyard, the guy doing the sessions, who went on to do a lot of, you know, hit productions afterwards. And he said, okay, yeah, we've got coming out with the music. So out came the MD and sort of just said, oh, we want it a bit like this. Musical director, sorry. Fine. And we started to play it. And then we got a kind of another instruction, a few more instructions. And then it was sort of lunchtime. This is one tune. And apparently we were going to go straight through, you know, which is fine. Got to about 5 o'clock. And in the evening, that evening, funny enough, I had a session with Andy McKay. And that was about 6:30, and I thought, well, we're not getting anywhere, you know. So I said, you know, I've got to go soon, and I said, oh, just a few more. Anyway, it got to like 6:30, and I still wanted to carry on, and nothing was kept. I mean, we were just playing the same tune all day, and as Quincy. Ron Carter, the bass player, said, if it isn't there on the second take, you can forget it. Which is, you know, and I think he's right. I mean, most of these things, the second take was a safety take, really. The first take was it. So anyway, I thought, well, I've got to sort this out because I've got to go. So I said, hang on, I just want to come in. Because you couldn't come in. So I knocked on the door. Control room door that sort of opened, you know, a bit like the Munsters, you know. And he stood there, you know, bit of a, you know, cod face, but sort of not looking too happy with his minders behind him. And then it occurred to me I'd have to address him, so I didn't know what to call him. Mr. Gaye, I thought, that's not going to be too good, is it? Marvin. Oh, so I said, Marvin. I've got a problem. I've stayed behind late. I've got to go and do another session, and I can't really do any more. I'll come back tomorrow, or I'll come back after the session, no matter what time it is, you know, and I'll do any overdubs or whatever. And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to make 5 phone calls to LA. Make sure you never work there again. And I felt this sort of shuffling behind me and Mo's behind me. And Mo just says to him, why not make it 6 calls? We all collapsed. And that was the end. We were fired from, got fired from Marvin Gaye's session. That was it. It was so funny. But what got me afterwards, he said, you'll never work in LA again. So he'd already thought that I'd already worked there, which is really strange anyway. I mean, I'm sure he would see the funny side of it afterwards, but that was the only session that was that was probably like that I'd ever really experienced. So maybe it was for the best.